Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to America once again, and we're going to go to another brewery that I've never tried anything from before. Now, these guys seem to be a very well established brewery in their local area, but they're from a state that I haven't really covered on the channel all that much, and there's no reason for that other than the fact that our American offerings of craft beer in Europe were quite random. You know, we used to get beers from one state one month, another state another month, and this state just never really kind of came up, to be honest with you. But from what I've heard, this brewery is very good. The beer that we're going to have a look at today is a style that they're very well known for, a style that I very much enjoy, and also one that's been growing in popularity quite a lot over the last few years. But it's also got a little bit of a twist to it that is quite Asian, and I think this one should be really quite interesting to review. So needless to say, I'm very, very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good one. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to the US, like I said. We're going to go to the state of Indiana, and we're going to go to the city of Columbus, which is a little bit south to the state capital of Indianapolis, if I'm remembering my American state capitals correctly. But it's kind of in the sort of centre of the northern part of the state, if you like, a bit to the south of Chicago, for those of you who are not so familiar with the American map. But that means that we're going to have a look at my first beer from 450 North Brewing Company, and this one is called Slushie XL Simulated Sours. It comes in at 5.3% ABV. As you might guess from the name of this beer, it is a smoothie sour ale, and this one contains passion fruit, pineapple, calamansi, tangerine and lemon. So yeah, this should be quite interesting. But this is one of maybe 4 or 5 beers that was imported here to Hong Kong from this brewery, and this is just the one that I thought sounded most interesting, to be honest with you. They had Slushie XXL, which was cherries and something like that, if I remember correctly, and I think there was 1 or 2 IPAs as well, if I'm not mistaken. But like I say, this is just the one that caught my interest the most because of the presence of calamansi, which we'll come back to a little bit later on in the video. But yeah, 5.3% American smoothie sour ale, this one from the state of Indiana, a state that has not been covered all that much on the channel actually. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what the beer has in store for us. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from 450 North Brewing Company. This is the very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated. And remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging systems. Just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the American playlist along with a number of other things, and we will continue to add to that as time goes on. And do check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well, because there are some very interesting things on the channel these days. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about 450 North Brewing. And the history of this one's actually quite interesting and a little bit unusual compared to some of the other breweries that I've researched before. So, 450 North Brewing are based in Columbus in Indiana, which, like I mentioned earlier, is a little bit south of the state capital of Indianapolis. And the company was founded back in 2012 by husband and wife team David and Brenda Simmons. So the two apparently met during their time at Purdue University, which is quite famous actually for its aerospace engineering program, if I'm not mistaken. One of my friends went there, but they met during their studies in the early 80s, and apparently Brenda also played basketball for the university as well. But they together opened Simmons Winery in 2000 on their 600-acre family farm, and this has apparently been in the family since 1850. So it's passed down the family for a number of generations. They consider Jacob Norton, who was born in 1827, as the pioneer of this whole family dynasty. But Jacob was a minister, among other things, and he acquired the 264-acre piece of land in I think it was the 1860s, but apparently in 1885 members of the family embarked on a journey to establish their own town, which was called Nortonburg, but this ultimately failed. However, the family continued to excel in things like medicine and stuff like this. But the linking of the Simmons and Norton families came in 1916 through the marriage of Nora Norton and Charles Simmons. They had a son called Bill, and he and his wife Marjorie are the parents of David, who is of course the current patriarch of the company. But prior to opening the winery, David was farming this land and Brenda was working as a teacher and a coach. But in 1998 they planted 4 acres of grapes on the farm, and then they went on to open the winery in 2000, and they were one of 3 new wineries in the state of Indiana to open that year. But by 2012 they opened the brewery, and the winery sales had reached about 45,000 bottles at this point, and that year they took the decision to expand the company by adding the brewery, a retail store and also a tasting room, and things have gone quite well for them since. But they started the brewery with a 10 US barrel brew kit, which is about 1600 litres per brew, and they expanded this facility in 2018 after a few years of continued success. Obviously things got a little bit difficult over the course of COVID because, you know, products having to be sold online and all of this sort of thing. But in December of 2023, they launched a distillery in nearby Bartholomew County, and this apparently is going to focus on the production of bourbon, but they're also producing some rye and wheat whiskey along with gin and vodka, and they've got an on-site tasting room there as well, and they are also producing cider under the Gnarly Grove hard cider brand apparently. So this really is a company that has a little go at everything. It basically started off as an agriculture, a family's agriculture company, and you know, they've gone into brewing alcohol and stuff like this with wine, beer, and now they've extended it to spirits. So quite an interesting company, and one it's a story that you actually hear fairly often in the craft beer industry. But as of May 2024, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 1,070 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and from what I understand, 450 North Brewing are fairly well known for these kind of fruity sour beers actually. But the name of the brewery is taken from one of the nearby roads, and that's why their symbol, as you can see on the can here, is one of these American road signs basically. So yeah, that is everything I could really find about 450 North Brewing Company and the family and the whole company dynasty behind it. But I thought it was really quite interesting because it's a wee bit unusual compared to some of the other breweries that we've come across over the years. But yeah, if you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a wee bit more about all the different things that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on and have a little look at the beer itself. So this one is an American pint can, which is 16 fluid ounces if you're going to use the American Freedom Unit scale. I always like to make fun of it because it makes no sense. But in the metric system, which is the right way to go because it's based on the universal solvent of water, it is 473 milliliters. But if we bring this up to the camera there you can see the 450 North Brewing Company symbol, plain silver top on the can. Like I said, 1 American pint, 473 milliliters, and you can see the name on the side of the can there as well. Slushie XL. There is a Slushie double XL, XXL, whatever you want to call it as well. And that one I think is a red sour. This one is going to be a yellow sour of course. But passion fruit, pineapple, calamansi, tangerine and lemon in this one. For those of you who don't know, and I certainly didn't know before I bought this beer, calamansi is also known as a Filipino lime. So apparently it's prevalent in Taiwan, the south of China, Malaysia, parts of Indonesia, Brunei, the Philippines obviously, things like this. So it's a very citrusy thing and it's used quite often in the cuisine there. I don't know how similar it's going to be to like yuzu or something from Japan, but yeah, we'll find out soon enough. But yeah, simulated sours, Slushie XL, 5.3% smoothie sour with a bunch of different fruits in it. Let's get this guy out into the glass then and see how we get on. Yeah, I'm not sure if I mentioned that earlier in the video actually, but this is another beer that I bought at Angry Beer in Mongkok here in Hong Kong, and they always get a random selection of beers. They're always importing different things, and this was one of their latest releases in May of 2024 when I'm filming this one for you. Let me just sugar that up a little bit and see what else we can get. Yeah, you can see there's a lot of sediment kind of chilling at the bottom of the can there. So we've got a decent bit of it into the glass before we actually drink the beer. But yeah, you can see that when we've poured this one, we've poured the majority of the beer into the glass, of course, but you can see that this one poured with about a finger of quite a bumpy cream coloured head there, and this looks really nice actually. You can see it's kind of medium-sized bubbles on the surface there, but really quite a soapy head further up than that, and that is just going to fade away to be a very thin foamy layer. But you can see the colour of this beer is absolutely beautiful, like big, just mango fruit juice smoothie type thing, and you know, that's exactly what you would expect from this particular beer. I did actually read an article from what seemed like one of the local papers in Indiana. Apparently you can put these beers in the fridge for like 2 hours before you you drink them, and you can get a proper like slightly frozen smoothie out of them. But you know, I wanted to try them in the proper beer form because this is what we've always done on the channel. But yeah, apparently that is something that 450 North recommends that you can do with their beers. But yeah, you can see with this one, lovely kind of bright yellow mango juice colour. This one, remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect the colour as well. And when it comes to kind of modern sour beers like this, of course, the fruit that is in them is going to play a big role as well. So when you think about what's in this beer, it's absolutely not a surprise. Does it say on the side here? No, they don't. Yeah, this is one of the weird things in America, is that they don't have to like list the ingredients and stuff like this as they do in Europe. So this thing probably contains a bunch of oats and a bunch of wheat and, you know, barley malt and things like this. But yeah, in America, in certain states at least, you don't have to state that on the side of the can as you do in many European countries. But yeah, the colour of this beer compared to other smoothie sours that I've seen before is not particularly surprising. Not too much in the way of visible carbonation. Obviously you've got a lovely kind of natural haze to this one. It looks pretty much like a New England IPA of some description, but yeah, it looks great, this one. It's pretty much, you know, when I think about the fruits that are in this one, this is what I would expect. So let's have a wee look at the aroma of this beer then and see how we get on. I don't think we need to say very much more about the appearance of it, but I'm very, very curious about this, needless to say. Oh, yeah. This is very interesting. I mean, I think it's very interesting to talk about the difference between, say, the European palate and the American palate, because quite often I find when I try the American beers, they're always packed with flavour, but they're a little bit lighter in the mouthfeel than their European counterparts. And quite often I think the American palate is quite a bit sweeter than the European palate as well. And the first impression that I have of this one is that it comes across like kind of sherbety almost, and you know, there was a thing going around for a wee while that was like candy sours, and I never got really into that, to be honest. But the first impression that I have when I smell this beer is it reminds me a lot of Skittles. It has this kind of almost candy sour type quality to it. But yeah, it does smell really, really nice, this one. I'm really curious to try this and see what it's all about. But yeah, all in all, the way that this beer goes together is really, really quite nice, but quite different from the European smoothie sours that I've come across before. And of course, the ones for me would be the Swedish ones, Elm 11, Duck Pond, Fermenterna. In Scotland, you've got Vault City and Holy Goat and things like this. But yeah, it smells lovely, and these beers for me, as I've said before, are quite simple in terms of their flavour and aroma profile, but if they're done right, they can be very, very good. So let's break this one down and just describe that for you a wee bit more in depth. So the backbone of this beer for me, there is a little bit of a kind of fresh white bready bread crust, some fluffy white bread of course as well. You can smell a little bit of a kind of yogurty type note in this one. I don't know how good of a reference point this is going to be, but for me it reminds me of like Petit Filou yogurts, Muller yogurts. As I say, in America, I don't know how popular like these sweet fruity yogurts actually are, but yeah, the aroma that you get out of this on the malty backbone is quite interesting. It's certainly not as creamy as the European ones I've had before. And like I say, I get a lot of this kind of like sherbety, candied sort of thing coming out of this one. A lot of Skittles, to be honest with you. It reminds me, the aroma of this beer really reminds me of the tropical Skittles. But yeah, you can certainly smell quite a little bit of oaty creaminess coming out of this beer. There is a little bit of a kind of Werther's original butter candy, butterscotchy note to it as well. But yeah, I don't know if there's too much else to say about the malty backbone of this beer. Now, I have to admit, I'd be very curious to know with this one whether they've added hops into it. As I've explained in many of these like smoothie sour beer reviews before, there is a bit of a debate among brewers these days as to whether you should add hops into the modern fruited sours like this. So if you go back to the Belgian sours, the Huizes and the Flanders Reds and things, what they used to do was add old hops into them that had lost a little bit of their alpha acid potency, because the worry was that adding fresh hops would take away from the sourness of the beer. But if you go fast forward to the modern context of sour beers, when you add fruit into beer as an adjunct, it's always going to suppress a little bit of the hoppy character anyway. So if you're doing like a smoothie sour like this, some would argue there is no point in adding hops into the beer because the fruit's going to suppress it. That point definitely does have validity, but at the same time, if you add the hops in anyway, it can give you a little bit more flavour complexity. So yeah, there's two sides of the coin there. It just depends very much on the approach that the brewer's going to take. Just going from the aroma of this one, I have a feeling that there's not hops in this. But at the same time, if I was told there was, it wouldn't be madly surprising. There is a little bit of a kind of, there's quite a bit of placebo, what I suspect is placebo in this one. There's quite a bit of like floral grassiness in there. Not too floral, more kind of zesty and grassy. But yeah, there's a lot of like candy, kind of sherbety type notes coming out of this beer. And yeah, the way that it all goes together, I think, is really, really nice. But yeah, I do get quite a bit of grassiness and a bit of floral note out of this, but I really do suspect that that is placebo. Yeah, on the fruity side of things, this one is kind of what you'd expect. I mean, what was it? We had mango, we had pineapple, no, sorry, passion fruit, pineapple, tangerine and lemon. I don't find this, you know, with tangerine and lemon, I would expect it to be a little bit more zesty than it is, but I suppose at the top of those you can get those tangerine and lemony notes. The calamansi I'm very curious about, because that's something I've never encountered before. But yeah, for me, I'm getting a lot of the passion fruit and a lot of the pineapple out of this one, and they're adding the kind of softer, creamy side of the fruity sour in this one actually. So yeah, obviously you've got little placebo notes of, say, like papayas and apricots and stuff like that in there, and a wee bit of a more kind of candied note. But you know, all in all, I think the aroma of this beer is really, really quite interesting. I love a yellow sour. In Europe these days, a lot of people are focusing on berry sours, and that was another reason that I picked this one over the Slushie XXL, because I wanted a yellow sour. But yeah, all in all, the aroma of this one is very interesting, very straightforward, but very, very nice. And that's quite often what you find with these smoothie sour beers. So as I always say, take a little bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think this is about time for us to try this one. So yeah, let's see if we can get the full American pint in here, which we can. Yes, that's great. Any sediment left at the bottom of the can? No. We got it all in. But yeah, this one is the Slushie XL Simulated Sours, a 5.3% smoothie sour with passion fruit, pineapple, calamansi, tangerine and lemon from 450 North Brewing Company, just outside of Columbus in Indiana over in the US. I'm very, very curious about this. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Ooh. I'm going to tell you straight away, it's very good. Definitely not quite as creamy as some of the smoothie sours I've come across from Europe, or even from the you know, One Drop Brewery in Australia, who are doing some really, really good stuff incidentally. This one is very, very citrusy, which might well be down to the calamansi, the tangerine and the lemon. you know, that's definitely something I would suspect, but it is very, very nicely done actually. Yeah, I'd say the flavour of this beer is really citric and really potent, so you have to be prepared for that with this one, but if you're picking it for the fruits that are in it, you've probably got an idea that it's going to be like that. I have to admit, I did suspect it would be a little bit more creamy and sweet, just, you know, because of what I've encountered with the American smoothie sours before, but and honestly, I like it. I think this is really nice. I like trying things that have a little bit of a different leaning to them, and this one certainly does that. So yeah, all in all, it's more fruit leaning rather than creamy leaning, if that makes sense. It's more of like a fruited sour rather than a smoothie sour in my mind. But my point of reference is obviously European. Maybe some Americans would disagree with that, but the question should always be, is it a good beer? And the question is, yes, this is very, very nicely done, but just be prepared. This one's going to give you a hell of a kind of sour punch to it, and that's not something to be scared of, definitely not. Yeah, let's break this beer down then and just describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. I think this is really good though. So, middle third of your palate. Yeah, the backbone of the beer, you have this, you do get a little bit of that kind of fresh white bready bread crust in there, and there are little elements of woodiness further forward on the palate, a little bit of cracker. These are things that I always get. But yeah, above that, it's like this really wet kind of, it's like this wet kind of, almost like squashy, spongy, fresh white bread actually. So I do like how that goes together. On top of that bread, you do have some really nice, you've got some really nice kind of wheaty elements coming out of this one. There is a little bit of a kind of bitey, but still quite smooth and slightly dry, wheaty character coming out of this beer. Like I say, for me this is quite interesting because smoothie sours like this, quite often in Europe they put a hell of a lot of oats into them, and this beer doesn't feel like it's got too much in the way of oats. It feels like it's more barley malt and wheat that's in this one. It feels a little bit like a Berliner Weisse or something like this, in honesty, because it's, yeah, the malt base is just that little bit lighter, but in all I think it's very, very nice. Yeah, so above the wheat, do we have a little bit of oat in this one? Because in honesty, usually it's the presence of oat that gives you that little bit of kind of creamy, almost yogurty flavour, and you do get a little bit of that into the aftertaste. So yeah, above the sort of oaty, the wheaty character in this one, sorry, you do, like down the middle line of your tongue, you can feel there's a little touch of oaty creaminess, and as you move out toward the edges of your palate, the creaminess stays there, but you just get that little hint of dryness there. But yeah, in all, I wouldn't say that there's too much of an oaty creaminess to this beer actually, so that's quite interesting. Yeah. I do like that in this one. Yeah. Flavour-wise, it's quite, it really is quite interesting, this one. Like in the dead centre of your palate, you can get a little bit of like a Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing. But yeah, as I say, white bread, you know, you've got bread crust, white bread, a kind of dense wheaty sort of thing. And then yeah, there's a little bit of oaty character. But like I say, this smoothie sour for me feels quite a little bit lighter than the European ones that I've had. It feels like there's less oat in this one and it's less creamy, but I still like it. But you know, that impression, I've got an idea that that impression might be simply because of the potency of the calamansi, the tangerine and the lemon that's in this one. I think that makes the beer feel, you know, it has a little bit of an almost kind of slightly puckering citrusy character to it, but I still like it. I still do like how it goes together. Yeah, I think we've said everything we need to about the middle third of the palate in this beer. Let's go to the back third of the palate. As I've often said, back third of your palate is going to give you very similar flavours to the middle third of your tongue, just at different intensities. But remember, sweeter flavours will come out further forward, more dry and bitter flavours will come out further back. So yeah, border region between back and middle third of your palate, you can feel there's mainly, it's mainly like a fluffy white bread and a wee bit of wheaty bitiness on top, but the base of that back third of the palate, you've got that lovely kind of fresh white bready bread crust, and there it feels a little bit drier. You've got a wee bit of cracker, but then yeah, you have that big fluffy white bready character in there, and it just, on the back third of your palate, it feels a little bit more kind of cracker-like, and yeah, it feels a little bit more sort of cracker and farmhouse bready-like, but then above that you can feel the more dense wheaty character coming out of this one, and the wheat does have a little bit of almost bitiness to it, and then you've got all the yeasty characteristics coming out of the beer as well. So let's look at those yeasty characteristics for the moment. I will say too that this beer really does mellow out the more that you drink of it, but this is making me wonder whether American sours are more focused on the fruit and the adjunct rather than the kind of malty backbone, because this has happened when I've tried the Pacific Northwest sour beers, that the level of sourness and the sharpness you get out of these is a hell of a lot more punchy than what you get in Europe actually. So maybe the Americans have a bit of a better palate for sourness than Europeans do, but it's always been the case that when Americans get a hold of a flavour, they kind of amp it up and just let it go wild, and that seems to be the case in this particular beer. But yeah, back to the yeasty side of the beer. The yeasty side of the beer for me in this one, in the dead centre of that yeasty character on the top of the back third of the palate, a little bit of a dense white bready character there. Around that you've got a more rusticy, farmhousey, crackery type bread, and then yeah, a little bit of bread crust. But definitely on that back third of your palate you can feel the flavour is taller. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, the way that that goes together is quite interesting. So yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, the more that I drink of this beer, I am wondering if, I think there might be a little bit of hop in this one, but not too much. But yeah, I do get a little touch of earthiness in the back corners of the palate as you come further forward. It's a little bit herbal, more floral aromaticity, then a bit of grassiness around the front curve of the tongue. But definitely the tangerine and the lemon in particular, probably the calamansi as well, you can feel all of those just pushing in and sort of saturating that green component of this beer, and that's very, very obvious in this one. This is one of the kind of most puckering and citricy sours I think I've ever reviewed on the channel actually, but you know, I still like it. It's just something that my palate needs to adjust to a bit more, most definitely. So yeah, I think we've covered the green component in just simply saying that. But the front third of your palate, where the fruity side of the beer comes out, the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you can feel fluffy white bread in there and just a little bit of the wheat on top. And again, the base of that front third of your palate, you've got the bread crust, a bit of cracker, brown bread, white bread, and then yeah, you can feel the fruity adjuncts just kind of coming in on top of that. If there are hops in this beer, I would say that little oily bubble where you normally get the fruity esters coming out of the beer, I think there's a little bit of like an oily sultana and an oily pear coming out of this one. But then the fruits like the passion fruit and what was it, the pineapple? Or yeah, passion fruit and pineapple in this one. Those two are kind of forming the backbone and the kind of softer part of the sour for sure. I think that's most definitely fair to say. Yeah. Yeah, I think the passion fruit and the pineapple in this one, you can feel those coming in, just saturating the front third of your palate. But then the potency of the calamansi, the lemon and the tangerine is very, very apparent in this one. And I really do like how all of that pieces together in this beer. It's quite unusual, but like I say, it is something that I quite enjoy. So this is very different to many of the European smoothie sours that I've had, and it's certainly not as kind of creamy and smoothie. I would almost, you know, I'd be more inclined to say this is a fruited sour rather than a smoothie sour. But they're calling it Slushie XL. So yeah, if you froze this beer, as I think was the suggestion on the website, you'd probably really enjoy it actually. But even as a smoothie sour, if you like, or a fruited sour, I think it's very, very nice. So I think we can leave the flavour at that for this one. Let's round off with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So for me, yeah, generally speaking, this beer, I'd say bottom end of full bodied. The carbonation is very, very smooth. I don't know if I'd go as far as being creamy with this one, but I think maybe in the American context it would be quite creamy. It's not that creamy compared to European beers, of course, but in terms of the IBUs with this one, it's you know, probably about 10 IBUs or something at the absolute most. But the real focus for this beer is the impact flavour and the sharp citricy kind of punch that this beer gives you, which I do really like. The malt base in this one, lovely sort of bread crust, you know, the bread crusty backbone. It gives you that wee bit of dryness, the smoothness in the middle, the creaminess and the slight sweetness on top, and then yeah, you've got a mix of fruity character in this one. Lovely kind of softer tropical fruit, and then the more citricy notes come in on top of that and just flatten out. But I wonder how much of the potency in this beer is coming from the calamansi. But all in all, I've really enjoyed this one. Certainly one of the more potent smoothie sours that I've come across, or fruited sours, whatever we want to call it. But the question should always be, did you enjoy the beer? And in my case, yeah, I would say definitely so. Yeah, it does have a little bit of that candied sour character to it as well that I've encountered with a couple of beers before. So it's very much like a fruited sour, you know, maybe 80% fruited sour, 20% candied sour. For the Europeans watching this video, I think that's very much a good descriptor of this one, and that's very much in keeping with what would be relevant for you guys. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This one was the Smoothie XL Simulated Sours, a 5.3% fruited sour from 450 North Brewing, just outside of Columbus in Indiana in the US. This one had, what was it, pineapple, passion fruit, calamansi, tangerine and lemon to it. This has got a hell of a citric kick to it, but really interesting beer, and I'm glad I got the opportunity to try this one. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from 450 North Brewing Company as well, and we will see about returning to these guys again in the fairly near future. But until then, slàinte, skål, cheers, and I'll see you guys in the next review. Ciao just now.